The sun beat down mercilessly over the remote army training base, the heat radiating off the sand-colored tents and metallic obstacles that jutted out across the sprawling compound. Dust swirled in little whirlwinds, catching in the wind like dry confetti, as the distant roar of helicopter blades faded into the horizon. Sergeant Ava Lawson stepped off the transport bus, her boots sinking slightly into the loose gravel. Her posture was rigid, alert, eyes scanning every corner of the base. Every shadow, every movement, every whisper was catalogued silently in her mind. Years of Navy SEAL training had taught her instincts that ordinary soldiers didn't even know existed. She was not here to make friends, and that was immediately clear to anyone who glanced her way. The other soldiers on the base, young, brash, barely a year out of basic training, couldn't resist noticing her. Ava was a small figure, unassuming at first glance, her frame lean and powerful under the faded gray t-shirt and cargo pants she wore. Her hair was tied back, mud-free, almost meticulous, and her eyes, sharp and calculating, made anyone who met them feel as if they'd been weighed and found wanting. "Who's the new girl?" muttered a lanky soldier with a smirk, elbowing his buddy. "She looks like she couldn't handle a pack of push-ups." Another laughed. "Bet she's never even held a real gun." Ava didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her presence alone demanded attention. Her boots crunched on the gravel as she moved, precise, purposeful, each step measured. She surveyed the obstacles scattered across the yard, climbing walls, muddy trenches, rope swings, all designed to break soldiers' bodies and test their endurance. She noted weak points, optimal paths, and the precise angles for efficiency. By mid-morning, the teasing had begun. The soldiers couldn't help themselves. They were confident, cocky, and desperate to assert dominance over the newcomer. A particularly audacious private, blonde-haired and wiry, sidled up to her during a break in the drills. "Hey, lady," he said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes, "why don't you take a shower unless you're afraid of a little mud?" Before she could react, hands grabbed her from both sides. Laughter erupted around her. Ava struggled instinctively, but the sheer momentum of multiple soldiers pushing and shoving was enough to throw her off balance. 1 second she was standing. The next, she was plunging headfirst into a massive pit of mud, cold and clinging, the stench of earth and sweat filling her nostrils. She hit the muck with a splash, the sticky mud seeping into her clothes and hair, coating her from head to toe. Soldiers hooted and jeered, pointing fingers, calling out and recording videos with their phones. Some cheered like they had just won a victory in a fight that wasn't actually a fight, yet. Ava surfaced, blinking, mud dripping from her eyelashes, yet not a single panic line crossed her face. Her gaze swept across the gathered soldiers, cold and unreadable. The laughter continued, louder this time as they assumed they had completely humiliated her. They had no idea. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted herself from the pit. Her movements were measured, almost theatrical, each motion dripping mud in slow arcs. The soldiers froze slightly. They weren't expecting poise, not in this moment. Yet Ava's presence seemed to grow larger, almost towering despite the muck. Her chest rose with slow, controlled breaths, eyes scanning, assessing, plotting. A small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of her lips. It wasn't a smile of happiness. It wasn't amusement. It was the quiet smile of someone who had endured worse, fought harder, and thrived in conditions far more brutal than this muddy stunt. "You think this is funny," she said softly, her voice calm, carrying just enough weight to make even the bravest soldier hesitate. They laughed nervously, thinking she was embarrassed or angry, but they had no idea how wrong they were. The commanding officer, preoccupied with his clipboard and schedule, walked by and barely glanced at the scene. There was no intervention, no reprimand, no acknowledgement. Ava had anticipated this. Control, she knew, wasn't always in others' hands, it was in hers. She turned slowly to face the soldiers. Mud dripped from her chin and streaked across her uniform, but her posture remained perfect, unyielding. Her eyes locked on the ringleader, the blonde private who had started this farce. He faltered under her gaze, suddenly aware that his prank might have unleashed something far beyond his comprehension. With deliberate slowness, Ava wiped mud from her face, smearing some of it into her hair, a subtle display, almost like a mark of battle earned and owned. Her silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, and the soldiers shifted uneasily. The laughter died down. A sense of something primal began to ripple through the group, fear mixed with curiosity. They have no idea who I am, she thought. They don't know the rules of this game. Her mind raced through possibilities, their weaknesses, their confidence, their patterns. In seconds, she had memorized every detail she could use against them in the days to come. Experience taught her that appearances were everything in moments like this. Fear, respect, dominance, all had to be earned, not demanded. Then, without a word, Ava stepped out of the pit completely. Her boots squelched, leaving messy imprints on the dry gravel beyond. She dusted her hands in a mock gesture, as if she were brushing away the ridiculousness of the entire situation. The soldiers watched, frozen, still unsure whether they had won or lost. A small group of onlookers whispered among themselves, confusion written across their faces. One muttered, "Who? What is she?" Ava's lips curved slightly again, the same quiet, chilling smile. This was not a smile of surrender. This was the smile of someone who knew the fight had just begun, and that the other side had already lost the first battle without realizing it. The sun continued to blaze overhead, but the temperature in the pit of the soldiers' stomachs had dropped. Their laughter had faded. They were aware now, just barely, that the newcomer, this seemingly frail, mud-covered woman, was no ordinary soldier. And she wasn't just here to train, she was here to dominate. Ava turned and walked away from the pit, mud squelching with each step. Her figure was both calm and commanding. Her mind was already plotting her next move, the strategy, the lessons, the subtle dismantling of those who had humiliated her. As she disappeared between the tents, unseen by most, a pair of eyes in the shadows watched her silently, calculating. The soldiers, still wiping mud from their uniforms, had no idea what storm they had just stirred or how close it was to breaking over them. Ava Lawson had arrived, and the rules of the base had just changed forever. The night fell like a curtain over the base, swallowing the training grounds in shadows and the low hum of distant generators. Soldiers huddled around small fires, brushing off the day's grime, joking nervously about the new girl who had stolen their laughter and replaced it with uncertainty. But Ava Lawson was nowhere to be seen. She had disappeared, leaving only the faint trace of muddy footprints that led toward the tree line. She crouched low, hidden in the shadows of towering pines that edged the base, every muscle coiled like a spring. Her breathing was calm, controlled, the way it had to be when survival depended on instinct. She watched the soldiers, the very same ones who had thrown her into the mud, as they laughed and teased each other, unaware that their supposed victory was already meaningless. Ava's mind replayed every detail of the encounter, cataloging weaknesses and strengths alike. She noted how the ringleader's arrogance made him predictable, how the others relied too heavily on groupthink, how they all underestimated her because they couldn't see the fire beneath her calm exterior. Years of Navy SEAL training had taught her that psychological advantage was often more decisive than brute force. And tonight, she would plant the first seeds. The camp was quiet now, the laughter replaced by murmurs and the occasional bark of a guard dog. Ava slipped silently along the perimeter, her boots making almost no sound on the soft earth. The mud from the pit had dried stiffly on her uniform, the grit cracking slightly with every precise step. She paused at the edge of the training ground, observing the young soldiers running drills in the dim moonlight, their movements sloppy, unfocused. She saw them making the same mistakes she had seen all day, rushing, overcompensating, leaving themselves open. She noted the hesitation of the blonde ringleader when giving orders, the way one soldier kept checking his footing instead of scanning the terrain. Every tiny detail was a map she would use tomorrow to dismantle the arrogance that had cost them their dignity today. Her focus was interrupted by a soft rustle behind her. She froze, every instinct alert. Another figure emerged from the shadows, a young soldier she hadn't noticed before, eyes wide with curiosity and awe. I didn't think anyone could survive that pit, he whispered, almost reverently. Ava turned to him slowly, the dim moonlight catching in her mud-streaked hair. She didn't speak immediately. Her gaze alone was enough to silence him further, and the young soldier felt as if she could see through every layer of pretense he had built around himself. "Watch," she said finally, her voice quiet but commanding. "Everything you think you know about survival, about strength, about control, you'll need to relearn it." The soldier nodded, swallowing hard, and Ava disappeared into the shadows once more, leaving him uncertain if he had really spoken to her or imagined the exchange entirely. By early morning, the sun had not yet risen, and the camp stirred with routine activity. Soldiers mumbled and stumbled through their morning drills, the memory of yesterday's humiliation lingering in their movements. Ava returned, appearing at the edge of the training yard like a phantom. Mud streaked her uniform, hair damp from the early morning dew, and her eyes were sharp, focused. She joined the exercises without a word, letting her presence speak louder than any boast. During the first obstacle course, soldiers whispered to one another, still unsure how to treat her, with fear, respect, or indifference. But when she started moving, the whispers died completely. Her hands gripped ropes with fluid strength, swinging with precision. She vaulted over walls effortlessly, her legs and core muscles coiled and released with perfect timing. She crawled through gravel and mud with the grace of someone who had done it 1,000 times in far harsher conditions, far more dangerous environments. The soldiers could barely keep up. The ringleader, trying to regain some semblance of pride, challenged her openly. "Think you're better than us?" he sneered, attempting to regain control through mock aggression. But Ava simply slowed her pace, side-eyeing him with a calculated stare. The glint in her eyes made him stumble over his own words. She didn't compete for his approval. She didn't care about proving herself in his eyes. Her goal was control, subtle and undeniable. By mid-morning, it was obvious. Ava Lawson wasn't just competent, she was exceptional. The soldiers' confidence faltered as they realized she had handled the mud pit with ease, and the obstacle course now seemed almost trivial to her. They began to notice her keen observation skills, the way she anticipated every movement, every misstep. Whispers spread. Who is she really? But the lesson of yesterday's humiliation had not been forgotten. The ringleader's smug confidence was wounded, simmering beneath a veneer of bravado. He muttered under his breath, plotting silently, yet he had no idea the storm he had unleashed. Ava's patience was deliberate. She allowed the tension to build, knowing that those who underestimated her would make the biggest mistakes. Later, during a team exercise in a simulated urban environment, Ava observed silently from the edge of a mock building. She saw the soldiers making predictable errors, hesitating when entering doorways, moving as a group instead of thinking independently, relying on instinct rather than observation. Each mistake was a lesson in strategy she intended to impart. Then suddenly, a twig snapped behind her. Ava froze instantly, every muscle in her body coiled and ready. She didn't move her head, her eyes swept the shadows peripherally. Someone had approached her, but not recklessly. The intruder was calculating, attempting to catch her off guard. A surge of adrenaline coursed through her veins, though her expression remained calm. She could feel every detail of the forest around her, the loose soil, the rustling leaves, the faint odor of sweat and fear. The intruder did not realize that Ava had already anticipated this moment. In the Navy SEALs, she had learned to read not just movements but intentions, a skill honed to lethal precision. Her hand twitched slightly near her side, a subtle gesture that could have signaled deadly readiness. Whoever was out there, whether it was a soldier or a predator of another kind, would learn quickly that she was not to be underestimated. The soldiers back in the yard, oblivious to the shadow lurking at the edge of the trees, continued their drills. They didn't know that Ava had vanished from their sight, observing, calculating, ready to teach them lessons they would never forget. She was no longer just the new girl. She was the storm waiting to strike. As the sun climbed higher, a light breeze rustled through the camp. Ava slipped silently back toward the tents, leaving only faint footprints in the mud and gravel. The soldiers, still uncertain of her abilities, were left with a creeping unease. Something about her made them question their assumptions, their confidence, and their understanding of what strength really meant. That night, in the deep shadows of the forest surrounding the camp, Ava paused. She wasn't alone. Eyes reflected a dim light in the darkness, watching her from a distance. Whoever it was, friend or foe, didn't know yet that they had just stumbled into the path of a Navy SEAL veteran who had already survived far worse than a muddy prank. Morning broke over the training base like a harsh spotlight, revealing a landscape transformed by yesterday's events. The muddy trenches, the obstacle course, and the scattered footprints told the story of a minor victory for the soldiers, or at least that's what they thought. In reality, everything had changed. The base was now under the quiet, invisible command of Sergeant Ava Lawson, a woman they had underestimated at every turn. The ringleader, blonde-haired and cocky, strutted around as if yesterday's stunt had solidified his authority. "All right, everyone, let's see if she can handle the obstacle course," he said loudly, grinning at the gathered group. The other soldiers snickered, nudging each other, already imagining her struggling through the ropes, the mud, the walls. Ava walked toward the course, her mud-caked uniform drying stiffly in the early sunlight. Every soldier in her path turned to watch. Some stared in disbelief at her quiet confidence. Others scoffed, certain that the new girl would falter. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her calm presence was louder than any taunt. The whistle blew, and Ava started. From the first rope climb, it was obvious that she wasn't just competent. She was exceptional. Her hands gripped the ropes with perfect strength, swinging smoothly over the wall obstacles, her legs tucking and propelling her forward with flawless timing. Every movement was precise, controlled, and efficient, a stark contrast to the hesitant, clumsy maneuvers of the other soldiers. The ringleader's face tightened. "No way," he muttered under his breath as he watched her leap from a platform to a narrow beam with cat-like balance. His mockery from yesterday began to feel distant, foolish. Ava crawled through the gravel pit, mud crunching under her palms and knees, and sprang up with a fluid motion that made the other soldiers blink. She wasn't just completing the obstacles, she was mastering them. Each action was deliberate, almost artistic, displaying a combination of strength, strategy, and experience that no textbook or instructor could replicate. The whispers began. Who is she?" asked one young soldier, voice trembling slightly. "I've never seen anyone move like that." Ava didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her eyes scanned the course, observing the other soldiers' mistakes. The blonde ringleader attempted to rush ahead, trying to show dominance. He vaulted over a wall too aggressively, misjudged a landing, and nearly fell face first into the mud. Ava caught him in the corner of her eye, noted his hesitation, and allowed herself a subtle smile, not cruel, not boastful, just knowing. As the course ended, the soldiers were panting, exhausted, and humiliated. Ava finished last, but she finished perfectly. Her movements were clean, controlled, efficient, and in that moment she had completely shifted the balance of respect. She didn't gloat. She didn't laugh. She simply walked away, leaving a trail of quiet astonishment behind her. During the next drill, the soldiers were paired off for a team exercise in a simulated urban battlefield. They were expected to clear rooms, work as a unit, and move with precision. Ava volunteered to go first, naturally assuming a leadership role without announcing it. She didn't shout, she didn't command, she simply moved. Her team followed instinctively, noticing her silent gestures, a subtle nod, a hand on the shoulder, a glance at the entry point. Every motion communicated strategy. Every step was calculated. Within minutes, they had cleared the enemy territory with a level of coordination that amazed even the instructors. The ringleader, now watching closely, tried to mimic her movements, attempting to assert control. He barked orders, tried to direct others, but his commands fell flat. His confidence, so brazen yesterday, had dissolved into confusion and fear. Ava noticed his every move, cataloging his weaknesses as easily as breathing. During a quiet moment, she pulled the group aside. "Listen," she said softly, her voice carrying authority without aggression. "If you want to survive in real conditions, you don't rely on luck. You rely on awareness, strategy, and control. Everything else is wasted energy." The soldiers exchanged glances. Some scoffed, some nodded, and a few, the ones who had previously mocked her, began to question their assumptions. Ava's quiet intensity left them unsettled. But the day was far from over. Later, during a field exercise involving navigation and stealth, Ava's tactical genius became apparent. She led her squad through the forest surrounding the base, moving silently and observing every detail: loose soil, animal trails, wind direction, and the subtle sounds of other groups moving in the distance. At one point, a soldier tried to take a shortcut through thick brush, expecting to gain an advantage. Ava's voice stopped him instantly. "Not yet," she whispered, stepping lightly over a fallen log to intercept him. "Every path has a risk, every choice has a cost." The soldier froze, realizing that she had anticipated his move before he even thought of it. He glanced around, noting the precision of her movements and the awareness in her eyes. He swallowed, suddenly aware that they were not just training, they were learning from a master. Meanwhile, the ringleader grew increasingly agitated. His attempts to challenge Ava directly were failing. Every maneuver he tried, every trick he attempted, she countered effortlessly, not with brute force, but with calm, calculated strategy. By midday, Ava had begun to shift the psychological landscape of the base. Where yesterday had been humiliation and mockery, today there was uncertainty, awe, and fear. She had planted the seeds of respect in some, terror in others, and an unshakable curiosity in all. The tension reached a breaking point during a simulated combat drill. Soldiers were scattered across the field, tasked with defending a position from a mock assault. The ringleader, desperate to reassert dominance, charged ahead recklessly, ignoring cover and coordination. Ava's eyes followed every step, noting the moment he exposed himself to danger. She didn't move immediately. Instead, she observed, waited, allowing him to overcommit. Then, with lightning speed, she appeared at his flank, her movements fluid and precise. She didn't strike. She didn't yell. She simply placed herself in his path, forcing him to stop dead in his tracks. "Careful," she said, voice calm, almost a whisper, yet carrying enough weight to silence the field. "Or you'll regret it." The ringleader froze, his chest heaving, eyes wide with disbelief. The other soldiers watched in stunned silence. They had seen her in action, but nothing had prepared them for this combination of discipline, awareness, and confidence. Ava wasn't just surviving the exercises, she was controlling them without overt force. The drill ended, but the psychological impact lingered. Soldiers who had been mocking her now whispered quietly to one another, exchanging anxious glances. Respect was being forged in the crucible of humiliation and awe, and Ava was the unseen blacksmith. That night, as the base quieted and soldiers drifted to sleep, a rustling sound came from the tree line. Ava, already alert and observant, froze instantly. Someone or something was moving in the shadows. Her eyes narrowed and a subtle smile appeared on her mud-streaked face. She wasn't just ready for this intruder, she had been expecting them. But who could it be? And what did they want from her? The night was heavy with tension, the kind that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. The base lay shrouded in darkness, lit only by flickering floodlights that cast long, distorted shadows over the muddy trenches and worn paths. The soldiers had retreated to their tents, believing the day's drills and humiliations were over, unaware that for Ava Lawson, the night was just beginning. She moved silently through the camp, her mud-stained uniform clinging to her like a second skin. Every footstep was measured, every breath controlled. Years in the SEALs had honed her senses to a razor's edge. Sound, smell, movement, all became data points, analyzed instantly. She wasn't searching for anyone in particular. She was observing, cataloging weaknesses, predicting behavior. From the shadows, she saw the blonde ringleader striding through the yard, trying to reassert dominance even in the dark. He glanced at the tents, at the other soldiers, and then down at the ground, muttering insults under his breath. He thought he had control. He thought he was untouchable. Ava's eyes narrowed. Not for long, she thought. A sudden noise, a twig snapping beneath an overgrown bush, made the ringleader freeze. He looked around, trying to pinpoint the source. Ava had been waiting, watching, and now the moment was ripe. She stepped from the shadows, her movements fluid, precise, almost like a predator closing in. "Do you really want to test me?" she asked softly, her voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. The ringleader's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing his face. He had underestimated her yesterday. He had underestimated her today. And now, in the dark, he realized he had misjudged everything. Before he could react, Ava closed the distance. She didn't strike, she didn't need to. Her presence alone was a warning. The silence between them stretched, heavy, suffocating. The ringleader swallowed, his bravado evaporating in the shadow of her calm intensity. Meanwhile, unseen by both, other soldiers watched from a distance. Fear and curiosity wove together in their expressions. They had laughed at her. They had mocked her. But now, watching her control a situation with nothing more than presence and precision, they began to understand that she was a force to be reckoned with. The night air was thick with tension as Ava withdrew, stepping back into the darkness, leaving the ringleader frozen in place. He didn't call out, didn't challenge her, he simply stared, a mix of fear and respect blooming in his chest. Ava's reputation, silent but undeniable, began to take hold. By morning, the base was tense. The soldiers moved through drills with quiet unease. They had seen her in action, yes, but they hadn't yet learned the full extent of her abilities. Ava took advantage of the quiet. She began implementing rigorous training exercises, pushing the platoon beyond their comfort zones, beyond their expectations. She led them through obstacle courses, camouflage drills, and endurance tests. Each exercise was a lesson in control, strategy, and survival. She demanded perfection, patience, and awareness, but she did not raise her voice. Her authority was implicit, absolute. During a survival drill, she divided the soldiers into teams and sent them into the surrounding forest to locate supplies and navigate the terrain silently. The ringleader, still trying to reclaim some shred of confidence, ignored her instructions, rushing ahead without strategy. Ava observed, noting his errors with quiet precision. The moment came when the ringleader stumbled into a trap, a simple misstep over a hidden route that would have thrown off any unprepared soldier. Ava appeared from behind a tree, her movements silent, swift, almost ghost-like. She didn't scold him, didn't mock him. Instead, she placed her hand on his shoulder, steadying him, guiding him back onto the right path. "You're predictable," she said softly, eyes locking on his. "Learn from it." The message was clear. This wasn't about punishment. This was about teaching them survival the hard way, exposing weakness, and demanding respect. The ringleader swallowed, chastened, but also aware that his humiliation yesterday had been only the beginning. Later, during a tactical exercise involving urban navigation, Ava's skills shone even brighter. She moved through the simulated buildings with a grace and precision that made her appear almost untouchable. Soldiers tried to keep up, but many faltered, making mistakes that she corrected instantly, sometimes with words, sometimes with subtle gestures. The ringleader tried again, attempting to assert control over a small team. He barked orders, moved aggressively, and even tried to rush ahead of Ava. But she was always one step ahead, predicting his every move, countering his aggression with calm, precise efficiency. The other soldiers began to notice. She wasn't just strong, She was unpredictable in the most dangerous way. By evening, exhaustion settled over the base. Soldiers collapsed onto bunks, mud-stained, bruised, humiliated, yet strangely transformed. They had seen a woman, quiet, unassuming, mud-covered, dominate a course they had struggled with for years. She hadn't shouted, hadn't hit, hadn't yelled. She had merely moved, observed, and corrected. The ringleader, unable to sleep, paced near the edge of the camp. His thoughts were chaotic: fear, pride, resentment, and all mixed into a cocktail he didn't know how to handle. He had underestimated her, mocked her, and now he had to wonder if he could ever reclaim control. Ava, meanwhile, had returned to her secluded spot near the tree line. Her body was sore, but her mind was alive, alert, and calculating. She knew the ringleader would try something, sooner or later. She also knew the others were watching, learning, and preparing for the next confrontation. A twig snapped in the darkness again, and Ava froze instantly. Her eyes, sharp and trained, scanned the shadowed forest. Someone was approaching, moving with caution but with intent. She could sense it, the faint rustle of leaves, the subtle pressure on the soil from each step, the rhythm of breathing almost imperceptible in the cool night air. Her hand hovered near her side, ready to react in an instant. She had faced far worse than frightened soldiers, and she had survived. Whoever this was would soon learn that Ava Lawson was not just a soldier, she was a predator in her element. The figure stepped closer, revealing itself slowly in the dim moonlight. It was one of the young soldiers from her group, wide-eyed, nervous, but desperate for guidance. I don't know what to do," he admitted in a whisper. "I don't want to mess up again." Ava's lips curved slightly, just a hint, but it was enough to reassure and warn simultaneously. "Then watch, learn, follow, and don't forget mistakes have consequences. Not for me, for you." The soldier nodded, trembling, and followed her silently into the shadows. Ava led him through a series of movements, showing him how to move, observe, and anticipate without making a sound. Every gesture was deliberate, every instruction a test of awareness. The night stretched on, the rest of the base sleeping unaware of the lessons unfolding in the darkness. Ava knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new confrontations, and new tests of control. But she was ready. She had survived worse, trained harder, and outlasted countless adversaries. As she returned to her hidden perch near the tree line, Ava noticed a glint of metal in the distance, a flashlight sweeping slowly across the forest edge, not aimed at her but moving deliberately, searching. Someone was watching, someone was planning, and this time she knew the game was about to escalate. The morning fog clung to the edges of the base like a shroud, wrapping the muddy trenches and weathered obstacles in an ethereal haze. The soldiers moved stiffly through their routines, still exhausted from the previous days of training under Ava Lawson's silent domination. The ringleader, blonde-haired and stubborn, fumed quietly in the background, nursing bruised pride and wounded ego. Ava, meanwhile, had already disappeared into the perimeter forest, unseen but ever-present. Her movements were almost ghost-like, gliding over uneven terrain with the confidence of someone who had been tested in far harsher conditions. Each step was deliberate, each pause calculated. She wasn't just training, she was assessing, strategizing, preparing for what was to come. It was during this quiet that a young soldier approached her. Unlike the ringleader and the others who had mocked her, this one's expression was different, a mix of awe, fear, and genuine curiosity. He had been observing her since the mud pit incident, watching her as she moved through the obstacle course, and silently, he had begun to understand something most of his peers couldn't. Ava Lawson was no ordinary soldier. I didn't know who you were," the soldier whispered, voice trembling. He kept his distance, unsure whether to be intimidated or respectful. You're something else." Ava didn't immediately respond. Her gaze was sharp, piercing, as if weighing his intentions, calculating the risk of trust. Then she said softly, almost like a command disguised as advice, "Keep your mouth shut. Watch, learn, survive. That's how you get through here." The young soldier nodded, swallowing hard. He had no idea what he was signing up for, but something inside told him that following her was safer than trying to compete or mock her. He stayed in the shadows as Ava led him deeper into the trees, away from the base, away from the distractions of ego and humiliation. By mid-morning, the fog had lifted, revealing the harsh contours of the training ground. Ava returned with the young soldier in tow, guiding him silently as they observed the platoon attempting a new drill, a simulated combat mission in rough, uneven terrain. The other soldiers moved with noisy bravado, uncoordinated and reckless, their earlier confidence fading under the weight of Ava's unspoken judgment. "Watch their patterns," Ava murmured to her new ally. "Notice how fear drives mistakes. Notice how arrogance blinds them." The soldier nodded, eyes wide, realizing that he was learning more from Ava's quiet observation than he had in months of formal training. She didn't just teach by words. She taught by example, by action, by the subtle power of presence. The ringleader, desperate to reclaim authority, led his small team into a forested area for a tactical simulation. He barked orders, moving aggressively, ignoring the natural rhythm of the environment. Ava noticed immediately. She had predicted this arrogance. She had also predicted the consequences. When the team reached a narrow pass between rocks and fallen trees, the ringleader made his move. He tried to rush through the obstacle without caution. As expected, his foot slipped, sending him sprawling into the mud. His team scrambled to help, but Ava was already there, moving faster than anyone thought possible, pulling him to his feet with a firm, controlled grip. "Predictable," she said calmly, her eyes locking on his. "You need to anticipate, not charge. Every step has a cost." The other soldiers watched silently, awe and fear coiling in their stomachs. The ringleader's face burned with humiliation, but he also began to understand a crucial truth. Ava's control wasn't about brute force. It was about precision, anticipation, and mastery of the environment. Later, the young soldier who had approached her earlier was put to the test. Ava guided him through a stealth exercise, moving silently through underbrush, crossing streams and navigating uneven terrain. She demonstrated every subtle movement, how to distribute weight, how to silence breath, how to sense danger before it revealed itself. "Your mistakes will get you hurt," she said softly, whispering instructions as they moved. "The world doesn't forgive hesitation or arrogance." The young soldier followed her precisely, trembling at times, but learning with every step. By the time they returned to the base, he had already experienced lessons that others would take months, if ever, to understand. The ringleader, however, was not finished. His pride was wounded beyond measure. He cornered her later, attempting a confrontation in front of a few curious soldiers. "You think you're better than us," he sneered, trying to provoke her. "What are you, some kind of seal?" Ava's eyes narrowed. The words were a spark, and she let the silence stretch just long enough for him to squirm under her gaze. Then, without aggression, she stepped forward, her presence enough to command attention. "I don't think," she said, voice calm and steady. "I know, and you're about to learn why confidence without skill is dangerous." The ringleader opened his mouth to reply, but the young soldier from earlier stepped forward unexpectedly, standing beside Ava. "He's right," the soldier said firmly. "We should listen. She knows what she's doing." The ringleader blinked, stunned. Not only had Ava gained authority through action, but she had also inspired allegiance, even in someone who had previously feared her. It was a subtle, psychological victory that left him questioning everything he thought he knew about leadership and strength. Ava didn't gloat. She didn't mock. She simply nodded to the young soldier, acknowledging the silent loyalty that had formed. Then she led the group back toward the obstacles for a new simulation, one that would push everyone to their limits. The exercise was brutal. Soldiers were forced to navigate treacherous terrain, carry heavy equipment, and respond to simulated ambushes. Ava moved among them like a shadow, correcting mistakes with minimal words, guiding, mentoring, and occasionally demonstrating techniques that left jaws dropped and hearts racing. By the end of the day, exhaustion had overtaken the platoon. Mud-streaked, bruised, and panting, they had completed tasks that would have seemed impossible just days before. Yet their transformation was subtle. Not everyone noticed the shift immediately. Some were still resistant, clinging to arrogance. Others were quietly awed, realizing that the woman they had mocked was a force of nature disguised in silence and calm. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ava retreated to her familiar spot near the tree line. The young soldier approached her cautiously, eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and fear. I think I understand now," he admitted. "Not just the drills, but everything." Ava gave a small nod, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "Good," she said softly. "You're learning faster than most. Remember, survival isn't about proving yourself. It's about understanding, observing, and reacting with precision." The soldier nodded again, swallowing hard. "I won't let you down." Ava studied him silently for a moment, then turned her gaze toward the base. The ringleader and the others were still out there, unaware that their dynamic had shifted irrevocably. She knew it wouldn't be long before someone tried to challenge her again, and this time she would be ready. Just as darkness fully claimed the base, a figure slipped silently through the shadows, watching Ava and the young soldier. Its intentions were unknown, but one thing was certain. Whoever it was, they were planning something, and Ava Lawson, quiet, mud-streaked and deadly, would soon face a threat far more deliberate than a prank in a mud pit. The morning sun cut through the mist that clung stubbornly to the training base, casting long, distorted shadows over the muddy trenches and obstacle courses. Ava Lawson stood at the edge of the training yard, her eyes scanning the scene. The soldiers were assembled, each one carrying the lingering mixture of exhaustion, fear, and awe from the past days. Even the ringleader, blonde-haired and cocky no longer, hovered near the back, fists clenched, jaw tight. A tension thick enough to taste clung to the air. Everyone knew, even if they didn't say it aloud, that Ava was no ordinary soldier. And now she was about to prove it. The ringleader, unable to contain his pride, stepped forward. "All right, SEAL girl," he spat, trying to mask his fear with bravado. "Let's see what you've got. Show us what all the fuss is about." Ava didn't respond verbally. She didn't need to. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and the soldiers instinctively stepped back, giving her space. She assessed him quickly, noting the way he shifted weight, the tension in his shoulders, the slight tremor in his hands, signs of a man who had been humbled but refused to yield completely. The rest of the platoon watched, silent, unsure whether to intervene, cheer, or flee. Ava's presence dominated the space, her calm intensity a palpable force. Then with the subtle grace of a predator she moved. The ringleader lunged first, attempting to assert control through aggression. His movements were fast but clumsy, fueled more by pride than skill. Ava sidestepped effortlessly, guiding his momentum past her with minimal effort. One hand on his shoulder, she spun him off balance, sending him sprawling into the mud. The soldiers gasped. Some whispered in awe, others froze, unable to process what they were seeing. This wasn't a display of brute force. It was precision, anticipation, and control all wrapped in motion. Ava didn't stop. She moved fluidly among them, correcting mistakes, redirecting attacks, and neutralizing challenges before they could escalate. Each movement was deliberate, economical, and devastatingly effective. The ringleader tried again, desperate, but every time he advanced, Ava countered with calm efficiency. It was as if she could read his thoughts before he even acted. The other soldiers attempted to intervene, but Ava's presence forced them into caution. They moved slower, more deliberately, mirroring her movements, learning instinctively. By the time the mock combat drill ended, no one had touched her. Not once. And yet the lesson had been delivered. She was untouchable when she chose to be. After the exercise, the ringleader stumbled away, mud-streaked and humiliated but alive. He stared at Ava, chest heaving, eyes wide. How do you do that?" he muttered, almost to himself. Ava's expression softened just slightly. She didn't speak immediately. She let the silence do the work. Then calmly she said, "Predictable moves are dangerous moves. Pride without skill gets people hurt. Remember that." The soldiers absorbed the words, some nodding, some wide-eyed with realization. Respect had been forged in the heat of confrontation, but fear lingered too, a necessary component of discipline. By midday, Ava transitioned the platoon into a survival and tactical training exercise. The goal was simple: navigate a complex environment filled with simulated ambushes, extract targets, and return without detection. But she added subtle twists, unexpected obstacles, hidden challenges, and scenarios that tested psychological resilience as much as physical ability. The ringleader and his small group of followers were assigned to a separate team, and their arrogance began to resurface. They attempted to rush through the mission, ignoring the subtleties Ava had drilled into them. But she was always watching, silently tracking their progress through binoculars from a concealed vantage point. Every mistake, hesitation, and misjudgment was noted. Halfway through the exercise, the ringleader's team encountered a simulated ambush, a series of explosions and gunfire noises that forced soldiers to take cover. Panic spread quickly. Soldiers scattered, tripped over roots, and collided with one another. The ringleader froze, unable to process the chaos effectively. Ava moved in like a shadow. From a distance, she appeared behind a tree, silent, observing. Then, in a series of fluid movements, she guided the soldiers toward safety. She intercepted the ringleader, redirecting him to cover, showing him how to move, how to think, how to survive. "Move with awareness," she instructed softly, barely audible over the simulated chaos. "Not with fear, not with ego. Control your mind first, then your body." The soldiers, though exhausted and rattled, began to follow her lead. Her calm presence became their anchor, her expertise their invisible shield. For the first time, the ringleader understood that strength wasn't just physical, it was mental, strategic, and controlled. By evening, the exercise concluded. Mud-streaked, bruised, and tired, the soldiers returned to the base. Some were silent with awe, some muttered incredulously about what they had just witnessed. Even the ringleader, bruised in both ego and body, carried a grudging respect for Ava. But Ava wasn't finished. She gathered the platoon in the center of the yard. "Today," she began, her voice calm but firm, "wasn't about winning a competition. It was about learning, about understanding your weaknesses, your strengths, and how to survive when everything is against you. Remember this, because the next challenge will be real and there will be no warning." The soldiers absorbed the words. The ringleader's pride burned, but he couldn't argue. He had been humbled, corrected, and dominated, and yet there was a strange, magnetic pull in Ava's leadership that made him want to follow, even grudgingly. As the sun dipped below the horizon, shadows stretched long and dark across the training ground. Ava returned to her hidden perch near the tree line, scanning the perimeter. She had anticipated the ringleader's arrogance, the soldiers' mistakes, and even the psychological fallout of her own actions. But she sensed something else, a presence beyond the base. Someone somewhere was watching. The night grew colder. Ava crouched low, every sense alert. The forest surrounding the base whispered with unseen movement. Her hand hovered near her side, ready for any threat, but her expression remained calm, unreadable. Then she saw it, a glint of light, subtle, deliberate. Someone was observing, testing, measuring her as she had measured the soldiers. A slow, creeping tension filled the air. She knew instinctively that this was not just curiosity. This was a calculated move, a challenge. Ava smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. The storm had arrived, and she was ready. In the shadows of the tree line, the observer stepped closer, their identity still concealed. But Ava could feel their intent, sharp, deliberate, dangerous. Whoever they were, the game had escalated from training exercises to a deadly test of skill, instinct, and control. And this time, there would be no rules. The base lay quiet under a canopy of stars, the only sounds the distant hum of generators and the occasional rustle of leaves. Most soldiers were asleep, exhausted from days of intense training and mental torment. Yet for Ava Lawson, the night was far from over. She crouched at the edge of the tree line, her eyes scanning the forest beyond the base with lethal focus. Every snap of a twig, every movement of leaves, every distant animal call was catalogued and analyzed. She could feel it, the presence that had been lurking, watching, testing her. It wasn't curiosity this time. It was calculated, deliberate, dangerous. And Ava, a Navy SEAL veteran, thrived in situations where danger waited silently, unseen, just like this. Behind her, the young soldier she had taken under her wing moved cautiously, following her lead. His eyes were wide, filled with a mix of fear and respect. "Sergeant, do you think they're here for us?" he whispered. Ava didn't answer immediately. Her gaze was fixed on the shifting shadows ahead. Then, in a voice calm enough to cut through the tension like steel, she said, "They're here to test us, and I've been waiting for this." For hours they moved through the forest with near-perfect silence. Ava taught the young soldier to read subtle signs, the disturbed soil where a foot had pressed too hard, a broken branch indicating movement, the faint glint of moonlight on metal. Every step, every breath was measured. She demonstrated how to move unseen, how to anticipate threats, how to remain lethal without being detected. Suddenly, a noise subtle but precise made her freeze. A figure darted between trees ahead, moving with intent. Ava signaled the young soldier to stop. They crouched low, watching. The intruder was armed, trained, and moving with caution. This was no ordinary observer. This was a predator testing another predator. Ava's eyes narrowed. "Stay calm, watch, learn, survive," she whispered. The intruder paused, scanning the terrain, unaware of Ava's presence mere meters away. She studied their movements, the way their weight shifted, the hesitation in their stride, the pattern of their breathing. Within moments, she had mapped out their behavior, predicted their next steps, and prepared a counter. Then, almost as if reading her mind, the intruder froze. Something was off. They sensed Ava's presence, though they couldn't see her. A tense standoff ensued, silence broken only by the faint rustle of leaves and distant animal calls. Ava's hand moved subtly to her side, ready to strike if necessary. Her mind raced through options, containment, observation, and, if forced, neutralization. She had faced worse adversaries, far deadlier scenarios, but the thrill of the hunt never dulled. Suddenly, the intruder shifted. Ava reacted instantly, stepping from the shadows with precision, her movements fluid and controlled. The intruder spun, eyes wide, but before they could make a move, Ava was in front of them, calm and commanding. "You shouldn't have come alone," she said, voice steady, unyielding. The figure froze. Then slowly they lowered their weapon, a gesture of acknowledgement, not surrender. Ava's gaze didn't waver. She studied them silently, noting their posture, demeanor, and intent. There was skill here, yes, but also respect. And Ava had earned it silently, with presence alone. In the distance, a faint sound broke the moment, the ringleader and the others, moving through the forest in search of their lost comrades. Ava knew they weren't ready for this level of skill, this level of awareness. She signaled the young soldier to follow and retreated further into the shadows. Hours passed as Ava observed the intruder. They didn't follow directly but stayed close enough to test her resolve, to challenge her patience. Every movement was a lesson for the young soldier, for the base, and for the intruder themselves. Ava was teaching without words, demonstrating control in every action. By dawn, the standoff had shifted. The intruder, recognizing Ava's mastery and dominance, stepped back, disappearing silently into the forest. The lesson had been clear. Ava Lawson was untouchable when she chose to be, and any threat that underestimated her would fail. Returning to the base, she moved silently, melting into the shadows as if she had never left. The young soldier followed closely, forever changed by what he had witnessed. He had seen a glimpse of the lethal precision, the calm authority, and the tactical genius that had made Ava a Navy SEAL veteran. And now, he understood the true meaning of respect. When they re-entered the training yard, the base was waking. Soldiers emerged from tents, rubbing sleep from their eyes, unaware of the night's events. The ringleader, exhausted but defiant, tried to act normal, but Ava's eyes met his across the yard and he flinched slightly. Something about her gaze, calm and unyielding, reminded him of yesterday's lessons and of every humiliation he had endured under her quiet dominance. Ava moved among the soldiers silently, observing, correcting small mistakes in posture, stance, and technique. Her presence alone was a teacher, a commander, and a force of nature. The ringleader's attempts to assert authority fell flat, and whispers began among the group. Respect, fear, and curiosity were slowly solidifying. They were learning the unspoken truth. Ava Lawson was not to be trifled with. By midday, Ava gathered the platoon for a final exercise, one that would test both skill and psychology. They were sent into the forest in teams, tasked with extracting a simulated target while avoiding detection. The ringleader's team hesitated, aware now that their confidence was no match for her expertise. Ava's team moved with precision, navigating the terrain silently, reacting instantly to obstacles, and remaining undetected. Every decision, every movement, every calculated pause demonstrated skill and discipline far beyond the others. The ringleader's team faltered repeatedly, trapped by overconfidence and panic. Each mistake was observed and catalogued by Ava, reinforcing the lesson that control, awareness, and anticipation mattered more than brute strength. By late afternoon, the exercise concluded. The results were clear. Ava's team had completed the mission flawlessly, while the others struggled to regroup. The ringleader, humiliated but resigned, finally approached her privately. You're different," he admitted, voice quiet. "I've never seen anyone like you. How do you?" Ava studied him, mud-streaked, sweat glistening, calm and unreadable. Then she spoke softly, almost as if offering a warning and a lesson simultaneously. "Strength without awareness is useless. Confidence without skill gets people hurt. And arrogance will always find its cost. Remember that." The ringleader nodded, swallowing hard, understanding at last the weight of her presence. As the sun dipped below the horizon once more, Ava returned to her hidden spot near the tree line. The forest whispered with movement. She sensed it immediately. The intruder from last night had returned, joined by another presence this time. The stakes had escalated. Ava Lawson, silent, lethal, and unyielding, prepared herself for a confrontation that would test every skill she had honed over years of training. The game was about to reach its final, deadly phase. The forest surrounding the base was alive with tension. Shadows stretched unnaturally in the fading light, blending with the mist that clung stubbornly to the undergrowth. Ava Lawson crouched silently among the trees, her body poised, every sense alert. The events of the past days had culminated in this moment, a confrontation that was no longer training, no longer a test of ego or discipline. This was a real challenge, one that demanded instinct, skill, and the full weight of her Navy SEAL experience. She had anticipated this escalation. The intruder from the previous night had returned, this time not alone. Two figures moved carefully through the forest, scanning, analyzing, testing. Ava watched, silent as a predator, recognizing patterns, calculating risks, and preparing for the first move. Beside her, the young soldier she had trained followed without hesitation. His movements were cautious, controlled, and precise, a direct reflection of Ava's mentorship. He didn't speak, didn't fumble, he observed. And he learned quickly. Ava's mind raced through possibilities, contingency plans, and countermeasures. Years of Navy SEAL operations had honed her to anticipate the unpredictable. Every leaf, every branch, every sound was data. She had survived extreme conditions, hostile encounters, and the kind of chaos most could never comprehend. And now, the stakes were no less real. The intruders paused, one crouching near a fallen log, the other scanning ahead with a subtle, deliberate caution. They were skilled, that was clear, but inexperienced against someone of Ava's caliber. She exhaled slowly, letting the forest noises carry her presence, every subtle movement calculated. Then she struck silently, swiftly, and decisively. The first intruder barely had time to react before Ava had closed the distance, her hand on his shoulder, redirecting his momentum and taking him to the ground with minimal effort but maximum control. The second intruder spun, weapon raised, only to find Ava already behind him, disarming him with an efficiency that left no room for resistance. The young soldier watched in awe, seeing firsthand how strategy, anticipation, and precision could neutralize threats without unnecessary aggression. Ava didn't rely on brute force. She relied on dominance of mind and body, turning the intruder's own movements against them. The first intruder, struggling to regain balance, realized the truth almost too late. Ava Lawson was not a soldier to challenge lightly. He froze, eyes wide, understanding the lesson before it fully landed. Ava's calm gaze met his, unyielding, absolute. "Stop," she said, voice low, carrying the weight of command without shouting. "You've tested the wrong person." Both intruders hesitated. They could see the mastery in her movements, the lethal efficiency, and the silent authority that radiated from her every gesture. They understood instinctively that further resistance would be foolish. Ava released them but didn't relax. She stepped back, maintaining control over the space and the situation. "Leave," she said simply, "and if you value your lives, you won't come back." The intruders didn't need to be told twice. They melted into the shadows, retreating, their lesson learned painfully, undeniably. As silence returned to the forest, Ava exhaled slowly, allowing herself a brief moment of reflection. This confrontation had proven not just her skill, but the principles she had imparted: awareness, control, precision. Strength without strategy was meaningless. Arrogance without skill was dangerous, and she had mastered both. The young soldier approached, his expression a mixture of reverence and disbelief. I've never seen anyone like you," he admitted quietly. How do you stay so calm, so precise?" Ava turned to him, mud-streaked and sweat-soaked, but with an unshakable composure. "Discipline," she said simply, "preparation, awareness, and respect for the consequences of every action. That's how you survive, not just today, not just here, but anywhere." The soldier nodded, absorbing every word. He understood now that the lessons she had imparted went beyond drills, obstacle courses, or simulated ambushes. They were lessons in life, strategy, and survival itself. Returning to the base, Ava moved through the yard, silent and commanding. The ringleader and the others, now aware of her recent confrontation, watched her approach. Their whispers carried a mix of fear, awe, and reluctant respect. No one dared mock her anymore. Every glance, every gesture acknowledged her dominance, not through intimidation, but through proven ability and quiet authority. The ringleader stepped forward, attempting one last assertion of authority. You're incredible," he admitted grudgingly. I've never," his words faltered. He understood fully that she had changed the hierarchy, shifted the dynamic entirely. Ava met his gaze, calm but firm. "You've learned today," she said softly, "and that's what matters. Pride without preparation gets people hurt. Now remember it every day." The rest of the platoon, observing in silence, absorbed the truth. Ava had not just survived the challenges, she had dominated them. She had faced intruders, controlled the chaos, and instilled lessons that would linger far longer than bruises or mudstains ever could. As night fell over the base once more, Ava stood alone at the edge of the tree line, watching the forest that had been her arena. She had faced challenges, threats, and humiliation, and emerged not just unscathed, but transformed into an unassailable force in the eyes of everyone around her. The young soldier, now standing beside her, whispered, "Will they come back?" Ava glanced at him, eyes cold and unwavering. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "but if they do, they'll find someone ready, someone they can't touch, someone who cannot be underestimated." For the soldiers at the base, the story of the mud pit, the humiliation, the challenge, and the ultimate mastery would become legend. Ava Lawson had proven that a Navy SEAL veteran was not just to be respected, but feared when underestimated. She had transformed the landscape of the base, reshaped perceptions, and shown the ultimate lesson. Skill, discipline, and presence were far more powerful than arrogance or brute force. The forest whispered behind her, shadows stretching long and dark. For Ava, it was a reminder that vigilance was never-ending. Threats would always exist, but she was ready to face them all. And as the moon rose over the tree line, casting silver light on the mud-streaked, sweat-soaked figure of the woman who had defied expectation, one truth remained unmistakable: Ava Lawson was untouchable. In the distance, faint but unmistakable, a new movement flickered through the forest. Someone or something was watching. Ava didn't flinch. She smiled faintly, knowing that every challenge was just another opportunity to prove why she was not to be messed with.